Hello, today we're going to talk about polymers, but not just any type of polymers, explosive polymers. Right, let's start off with some background first. So I'm going to assume you all know what a polymer is, in that it's just a repeating chain of monomer units. But in terms of how polymers are formed, there's two general types of ways, and that's chain and step growth. Chain growth requires an initiator to start the polymerization and normally continues via a radical mechanism, but there are other types of mechanisms. Right, if we take ethene for example, we take two ethene monomers that react to form an ethene dimer. And if we throw in some hydrogen peroxide there as our initiator and shine some UV light in it, it will get angry and attack everything. So in this example will be a hydroxyl radical attacking the pi density of the ethene double bond. And this forms a radical on one of the carbons of the ethene, breaking the bond. And the reaction will then propagate many times to form a long chain polymer. And then this is ended by when two radicals meet and join together, terminating the reaction. Okay, so the other type of polymerization I mentioned, step growth, involves monomers that can react with each other to form a polymer chain. So the reaction here is different to the radical one we just mentioned because it occurs between two reactive groups that are already on the monomers, and they're usually situated either side of the molecule. And one example of this is nylon, which is used in absolutely everything from like car airbags to toothbrushes and just literally everything. Nylon's made from two different monomers, so it's a copolymer. And for simplicity, we'll call one of them a diamine and the other one a dicarboxylic acid. So these two functional groups can form something called an amide linkage or peptide bond. So having the reactive groups on either end of the molecule allows the amide linkages to form and create a long chain of alternating monomers of the dicarboxylic and diamide, forming a polymer. Right, so that's the background done now. So now we get on to the explosives. I'm sure most people have heard of plastic explosives to some capacity, be it from sort of movies or games or whatever. But the term plastic explosive is actually quite vague. What does it actually mean? So there are two ways you could interpret the name plastic explosive. Either the actual polymer chain itself is liable to fall apart and release energy in the form of an explosion, or there is some explosive compound embedded into a plastic. Right, now C4 is an example of the latter of those two. The explosive in C4 is called RDX, and it's an alternating six-membered carbon-nitrogen ring with nitrogen groups attached to each carbon. And all that nitrogen would much rather be nitrogen gas. So hence the molecule doesn't really want to exist at all, and it will release lots of energy when it does. If you shock it, and it will form a nice stable gas when it's doing so, and entropy definitely improves. The RDX is embedded in a polymer called polyisobutene, which is unsurprisingly formed from monomers of isobutene. Now this is slightly different to the radical mechanism, but there are a few similarities. It's still an example of chain growth, as we discussed before. And this proceeds via something called cationic polymerization. And it uses a Lewis acid, in this case aluminium trichloride, which has vacant orbitals on the aluminium, which can accept electron density. So we're going to go through a mechanism now, but not here, because my ChemDraw abilities are not that great, so I'm going to do it on a tablet. So we'll go to that now. Right, so if we start off with the Lewis acid we've just discussed a minute ago, the pi bond here is going to attack the empty orbitals of the aluminium. From that, we then get this charged species here. From this, another monomer of isobutene can attack, as shown here, with a positive charge. And then that's what it will look like afterwards. And then we get another attack, and then another one, with the three arrows representing multiple attack. So this is our sort of polymer structure here, and this blue circled is the termination step, which is normally done by the loss of hydrogen. Right, so I'm sure you can see the similarities of the radical mechanism in that. Right, so if RDX is our explosive, then why do we need the plastic? Well, RDX and many other explosives used in this capacity are crystalline, and crystals just aren't very useful. They're all brittle and just not good at all. So embedding them into the polyisobutene and adding plasticizers, which we'll come to in a second, allows the user to mold the plastic into whatever shape they want, really. I mean, it's practically like Play-Doh consistency at this point, just not Play-Doh. And these plastics can hold a lot of crystal. I think it's something like 96% explosive. Anyway, I mentioned plasticizers a minute ago. What is that? Plasticizers are molecules that are inserted into plastics to modify their properties, and this usually means something which disrupts the nice layered ordered structure of the polymer, making it more squishy or rigid. You can go either way. And following the previous example, the plasticizer used in C4 is mainly something called a diacotyl sabacate. But just look at it, it's all big and it just gets in the way of all of our nice polyisobutene, making it nice and moldable as a Play-Doh consistency. Right, so what if I told you that we could have all the properties of a plasticizer included into another compound that is also energetic itself? Well, that sounds pretty terrifying. So this is an area of research that is probably not as prevalent as it was in the past, but it is still active, and it's that of energetic plasticizers. And I mentioned before, these do have a tendency to explode. So as long as the energetic plasticizer isn't too explosive, it can improve the energy stored. Well, it will improve the energy stored in the plastic. Right, so as long as this energetic plasticizer doesn't make the compound too explosive, it can improve the energetic properties as a whole, but it does this whilst acting as a plasticizer. So it sort of kills two birds with one stone. It makes it more moldable and it gives it more power. The plasticizer used in C4 isn't actually explosive, which is a bit boring, but it does make it more safe to use, and RD8 is a very good explosive, so it is not really needed. Right, now we've finished talking about C4, so we're going to move on to the other type of explosive polymer we mentioned, and that's polymers that are actually explosive themselves, so they're liable to fall apart in their own structure. These are a lot less common than the previous type we were discussing, but they do still exist. And a common example is something called nitrocellulose. So we get some cellulose, which is normally in the form of cotton wool, and we nitrate it with then we get an energetic polymer. And while I wish I could make this and show it off, I think I would probably violate every single term of my fire safety agreement that I have signed, but we can watch a YouTube video instead. So I'll put this up down here, and we can see that this is a very quick explosion. Nitrocellulose itself isn't actually that explosive, it's mainly the air in the cotton wool that gives it a lot of oxygen, which allows it to explode properly. So this is sometimes used by magicians as a way of having an explosion in your hand, because it doesn't hurt too much. I don't know, but I assume it doesn't hurt that much. But it burns very brightly, leaving no ash, so it looks very impressive. So if you put a little bit on your hand and it just blow it up, everyone's going to be super impressed by your magic skill. Oh dear. So while it's all impressive and all you've actually done is added explosive functional groups to the polymer, which isn't that sophisticated. So if we want to look at some more sophisticated energetic polymers, these generally have the same sort of structure as actual explosives. So you have your nitro groups like in nitroglycerin, but you'll also have sort of peroxide linkages and bonds that are unstable, and these generally contain a lot of nitrogen in them, which allows them to fall apart into stable gases. And the trick is just to not have it too sensitive, so in synthesis that would just be not practical. So research into these is still ongoing, and there's also potential uses for these kinds of explosives. One example I found was being used as a way of igniting rocket fuel, so as a charge. Unlike nitrocellulose, new classes of polymer explosive tend to incorporate lots of nitrogen in them, especially in the backbone structure. And the major advantage of this is that when they do explode, the products are mainly nitrogen gas, which makes them a lot greener and a lot better for the environment, which is sort of the ultimate goal for a lot of science these days. Right, that's the end of the video. I hope you learned lots of things about explosives and polymers, a bit about both.